So that's why.
Okay.
I can go elsewhere if you think I should be visible.
We're live.
So we go?
We're live, I'm sorry.
Okay. So hello, my name is Anubandh Kate, and I'm delighted to welcome you all to the very first EU-India People Summit that will be held between 1st of May to 8th of May. And it is starting today, it is starting now. So the EU-India People Summit offers you more than 30 panels, and there are around 80 panelists who will participate. And these include renowned intellectuals, parliamentarians, social activists from India, from European Union, and around the world. So we have here panel discussions, documentary screenings, workshops, and fireside conversations. The two panels that we have are in French, one in German, and the rest are in English. The broad themes that we have are We, the People, Urban Futures, Identity and Nations, Human Rights, Digital Democracy, Business and Human Rights. So for a detailed schedule, do visit our website. All events are free and they are also live streamed. So for the next 10 minutes, I will talk about why we need this summit, why we are organizing this summit. I will present you the group, the Liberal Indians France group, which I represent, the role of the Indian diaspora and its engagements in Europe, and lastly, what to expect from the summit. So why we are having this summit? So so far there have been 15 official diplomatic summits between EU and India, and this happens every year. And this year, on 8th of May, this will be the 16th such official summit. And these official summits are close to civil society, and not just the Indian civil society, but they're also close to the European civil society. And these are the people whose lives are at stake. The decisions which are taken during these summits matter to the people from India and EU. So the idea is to, in our People Summit, is to explore and understand together how these two diverse and multicultural democracies can meaningfully and substantially engage with each other. And the goal is also to bring all experts, activists, parliamentarians, media persons, and people from EU and India together. And this is, to me, this is not just EU-India aspect, because there is also EU aspect. Each country on top of the European Union's official position has bilateral relations directly to India. And this will be a nice way for different countries to discover. And the same goes for Indians. This is a good chance to see how European Union looks at India and how different countries in European Union. So now I will talk about the Liberal Indians France group that I represent. This group came into being in late 2019. And what we do, so we try to unite Indians and all those who are committed to the democratic, plural, and human ethos of the Indian Constitution. We organize several discussions, events, protests to highlight the social, cultural, and political realities in India. Some of our goals are to counter the stereotypes that exist in France about India. For example, a lot of people, when it comes to India, think of India as a land of yoga, of naturopathy, of meditation, spirituality, Bollywood, and a lot of other things, which are all true. But this is not just it, there's more to it. We also try to bring in realistic coverage about India in the French mainstream media, to facilitate smooth integration of Indians into the French society and widen the Indo-French people-to-people exchanges. Our group also runs a small cine club in a small Parisian quartier colony, in a small library, where we try to show every month a movie from India, which is neither Bollywood or not documentary, but a movie which captures the linguistic cultural and artistic diversities. And during these sessions, we have people coming with some food to munch on, and we have discussions, and it's a lively exchange. Moving on, I would say, what is the role of the Indian diaspora and this engagement in Europe? So when we think about the Indian diaspora, looking from India, the first word that comes to mind is NRI, non-residential Indians. And even to that, we associate it mostly with the Indian diaspora in the United States or UK, which is substantial, and which is also mostly pro-RSS, pro-BJP, pro-Modi, and Howdy Modi and all that comes together. So that's one image that we have. But interestingly, a few days before, I came across another view. Sanjay Baru, who was the media advisor to Manmohan Singh, the Indian former Prime Minister, and who wrote the famous book, The Accidental Prime Minister. He recently published a new book, which is titled India's Power Elite. And in this book, he says that the Indian diaspora, which is sitting in the West and in Europe, and by Indian diaspora, he means the other side, let's say the secular, liberal diaspora. And for him, these are people who are sitting in Europe in their privileged lives, and they are writing in Indian newspapers, giving interviews, and to some extent, it's a preachery mode that the diaspora gets in. And he feels that you have abandoned us, you have left India, and to deal with the current regime. And so in a way, he was critical of their role. So with this background, I think the situation in EU and US is a bit different. First of all, also UK has more Indian diaspora, but that's not really the case in other European countries so far. And I would say privilege is something that most of us also had when we were in India. We come from middle class, rich families or other backgrounds that we have. So privilege is not something unique. Of course, there are other advantages being in Europe. But we have left India, and yet India hasn't left us. And I guess that's the case for most of us. And importantly, we need a voice of India to be heard in West. So we have a role, and that's what we are trying to play. So in Europe, we have several groups, like we have the Indian diaspora groups, like we have the London Foundation Study, we have India Solidarity Finland, we have Indian Alliance in France, we have Peace Vigil, South Asia Solidarity groups, and there are other groups in Europe as well as outside. These groups have been since last few years, have been involved in different protests. So anti-CA protests were among the major ones. We have been doing donations whenever there are crises in India. We are also sending memorandums to European and other national parliaments in Europe. We have been sending letters to Indian embassies, Twitter storms, and a lot more. But I will now come to a specific point. For example, looking from France, each country in the European Union has a special relation or a context. For example, when we talk about France, we have the famous Rafale deal of the Rafale jets. France is also a UN Security Council member, so a major country. And it is said that India is also looking at France as the next Russia, as a good ally. But it needs to be also understood that not all is well in France. For example, just a few years before, we had the Gilets jaunes, the Yellow Vest manifestations, so social unrest. There are a lot of farmer suicides in France as well. I was surprised to know that. There's substantial violence against women with many casualties. Even the main women's salary difference is there. And then there is this rise of the right-wing parties. And moving on, even at the European Union, it cannot be said that everything is fine. There is a huge democratic deficit. There's European Parliament, but which doesn't have all the mandate. In parallel, there are European Council and Commission, other bodies. and which are not really democratically elected. And uh, there are also right-wing parties within which are trying to weaken the institutions. So challenges are everywhere, not just in India. Democracy and human rights are universal values. So I would say everyone is involved, and the stake is it's at stake. Our interests are at stake, and that's why we need a global alliance. Lastly, I would aim with talking about what we expect from this summit, what I expect. So we hope that this summit serves to shape the vision for a future that envisages a plural, democratic, secular, and right-based collaboration between EU and India. And we also hope that the future of diplomacy should be embedded in human rights and become progressively open sourced. The summit discussion will blueprint of the roadmap that EU and India relations should take, which means commitments to human rights, religious freedom, and minority rights. And in general, I hope that the summit will help reach to more people in European Union as well as in India, and this will help to continue to strengthen the dialogue, which is a hallmark of democracies everywhere. So with this, I end my speech. Once again, I welcome you to this summit, and I appeal to you to join. And now I invite my friend Indu to take this forward. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Welcome. Can you hear?
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the first ever EU-India People Summit. This is an exciting moment for all of us as we begin a new journey of civil society engagement. I am Induja, a human rights practitioner, a student of law, and an organizer to the People Summit 2021. We live in a very challenging time where we are affected not just by actions at a local level, but from any part of the world. Across the world, as well as in EU, we have been witnessing human rights and democracy backsliding, and the COVID pandemic has exacerbated the situation further. The World Justice Project Rule of Law Index showed more countries have declined in their fundamental rights score than any other rule of law factor, both over the last year and the last 5 years. This is a moment of caution as strong rule of law and fundamental rights are associated with factors like higher GDP per capita and better rates of basic health outcomes. In recent times, the world has also seen increased challenges with adverse impact of digital technologies in spreading misinformation and hate speech. And we have also seen a tendency towards curbing civil and political rights to dissent, freedom of speech, and invasion on right to privacy. Well, let's not lose hope yet. The latest EU Action Plan for Human Rights and Democracy 2020 to 2024 states that defending human rights and democratic principles is a collective exercise and not a unilateral endeavor. And it expects the EU to take a strong leadership on human rights and the rule of law at home and abroad. Also, the 9th European Union India Human Rights Dialogue held on 12th April 2021. The European Union as well as the Government of India reiterated their commitment to the shared principles and values of democracy, freedom, rule of law, and respect for human rights. These escalating human rights challenges in an ongoing COVID pandemic situation calls for multilateral cooperation between Europe and India at state level. Similarly, there is a need for transnational engagement of civil societies and citizen assemblies between India and Europe who believes in connected and collected values of human rights and democratic values in rebuilding transparent and healthy democratic societies. The EU-India People Summit is a result of such a vision to build a stronger partnership between the civil societies, academia, and a forum for citizen engagement with democratic actors across the largest democracies of the world. Addressing the human rights concern, over the 8 days, there will be a number of panels focusing on human rights theme. For example, we have a panel discussion on whether civil societies can be involved in official diplomatic dialogues concerning human rights, and it will be led by Ravi Nair. Another one that I look forward is to the panel on migrant journey. Also under the business and human rights theme, we have panels which discuss on the scope of incorporating human rights standards in future bilateral trade agreements and the impact of growing due diligence legislation in Europe in minimizing the corporate human rights violations for India. If you think this topic is important, please share it with your friends and your colleagues. It's not too late for them to register. The People Summit is accessible to all, and your engagement in our panel discussions are very valuable. Thank you for joining us today.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear press who is attending, dear attendees, dear everybody who's listening in on the live streams on Twitter and YouTube and Facebook, and everybody who's actually here in the audience. I am incredibly humbled that the day is finally here when we kick off the EU-India People Summit. My name is Alina Kahle. I am a legal sociologist, critical human rights researcher based at Lund University, Sweden, and I'm affiliated with the Foundation London Story. And I've been working tirelessly with the other wonderful people here to make this summit happen. In the past few years, I have become very scared. I've always welcomed governments meeting at diplomatic summits, and I welcome especially that the climate crisis has finally found its place on the agenda. I was born in Germany, and I've spent a considerable amount of time in India, in Egypt, in the United States, and I have breathed in both healthy air as well as heavily polluted air that made me cough up black chunks. And I am extremely worried about the future. And this worry I bring to the summit, but also some careful optimism, and I'll get to that in a bit. I'm worried about my future, yes, but mainly of the future of those people whose voices are not heard here at the People's Summit here today, let alone at diplomatic summits, where governments represent their citizens and no more and no less. But where does my careful optimism come from? And what is the reason for this People's Summit's hope? In the Netherlands in 2019, the Supreme Court of the country actually ruled in favor of the Urgenda Foundation, who had sued the Dutch government for not abiding by its obligations to drastically reduce emissions. And just now in 2021, the German Constitutional Court passed an even stronger ruling. The highest court of the country emphasized that reducing emissions is not something that there are two sides to. Not cutting down emissions to zero would violate Germany's constitution. And for countries such as Germany and the Netherlands, where rule of law traditions are strong, I allow myself some careful optimism. At the same time, those very hopeful judgments only occurred because civil society stepped up and went to the highest court of their country, and because the judges on their cases had been sensitized about the dangers of not acting now. As we speak, people around the world are defending their homes and ecosystems against droughts, floods, and all other natural disasters that seem to be worsening by the day. And they do not benefit from the same reasonable judiciary. Environmental activists are killed intentionally by those whose interests they would harm. And the climate crisis is already taking lives now and is on a broader scale disrupting the fabric of society and citizens' abilities to engage with decisions that are made around them, affect them, and are sometimes against them. India is currently in the headlines for its total collapse of the healthcare system during the COVID pandemic. But this catastrophe is just one of many. Last year, a massive hurricane ravaged West Bengal. A locust plague of biblical proportions fell over India. Cities once again recorded the highest temperature ever. Our transgressions of the planet's boundaries are becoming ever the more apparent, and the so-called fight against the climate crisis is not a fight that humans can necessarily win anymore. By choosing to set the goal for climate neutrality worldwide at an average of the year 2025, it is a given that the worst will not be prevented anymore. Becoming climate neutral, that is, putting back what we take when we take it, by 2025 no longer serves climate crisis prevention, but mitigation and adaptation to the worst. And the EU-India partnership addresses climate change in several places, but its focus is on designing strategies to adapt and create technology so that humankind can continue to roam the earth. The strategies that most governments around the world have chosen is not one that young and Indigenous activists wanted to see. And as their worries were not heard the first time around, there is a lingering fear that their voices will continue to not be heard once the climate crisis has unfolded its true horrors. Humans make up only 0.01% of all biomass on the planet. And while the most fortunate humans may find a way to live through this, the remaining 99.9% of the planet's biomass never had a say. And the strategy of choice seems to be to accept the climate crisis as a fact and to tinker at the margins by replacing old technology with new. And yes, artificial intelligence, advanced software, carbon sequestration, and such machines as they exist, for instance, across New Delhi that suck up pollution from the air are important. But protection from the climate catastrophe is not something that the market economy can be left to handle entirely on its own. The German Constitutional Court's ruling from 2021 reaffirmed this. Not addressing the climate crisis with utmost sincerity will mean that the German government would violate its people's human right to life and dignity, and their people's right to life with the highest possible attainable standard of health. Access to protection from the climate catastrophe is also not charity. Citizens of the European Union and India, as well as any other person on their territories, be they stateless, are rights holders. So while the governments of the European Union and India affirm in their strategic partnership that they place great emphasis on climate crisis mitigation and adaptation, all rights holders must benefit equally and unconditionally. While the governments are eagerly investing billions in smart cities and advanced technology, we will make inexcusable mistakes if not everyone is included. As duty bearers to their rights holders, governments must draw on all solutions that the scientific community, private corporations, civil society, and even the youngest of activists propose. This People's Summit brings together as many voices as it could, given its resources. Rather than staying in expert journals, we communicate climate science to those politicians who agreed to join us at the summit in fireside conversations. We expand the discussions previously left to annual reports of some entrepreneurs and ask ground level activists to give their feedback. We ask experts from Mexico to share with their colleagues from India their experiences on how budget can be best allocated so that the urban has a future. And I am so looking forward to all of these exchanges and wish everyone who is speaking and listening all the best. We start off with our first event on the climate crisis topic and the future of cities tomorrow at 12:30 Central European Time. So I again cordially welcome everyone at the EU-India People's Summit. But still, as the planet heats up, seasons shift. Mosquitoes carrying malaria and dengue I apologize for the technical glitch. I was shortly muted. I would like to pass on to my colleague Sneha Thote, because as the planet heats up and as mosquitoes carrying illnesses become active in longer periods of time, we will have more and more health crises. And on this note, I pass on to my colleague Sneha Thote, who will dwell on the havoc that COVID has wreaked. Thank you.
Thank you, Elena. Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is Snehal Dhode. I'm a law student in India, a volunteer with Foundation The London Story, and a member of the steering committee of the EU-India People's Summit. I welcome you all here. I am here to give an overview of the challenges that we are facing due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me start with India. Today, as I speak, thousands of people around me, in my city, in my state, and in my country, India, are struggling to get hold of oxygen cylinders, hospital beds, and basic things like medicines. In the last 2 weeks, every day we have received news of someone I knew succumbing to COVID-19. My father went to 2 hospitals in order to get vaccinated, but he was sent back due to there being a shortage of vaccines. The healthcare system in India and in other countries like India is dwindling. We are not able to cope up despite having a year to prepare. The situation in India is very, very bad. In addition to an oxygen shortage, our crematoriums are facing a wood shortage because the number of people that are dying is increasing every day. This is the most obvious impact of the pandemic, the most out there impact of the pandemic, which is death, suffering, and an overburdened healthcare system. However, the pandemic has brought more with it. I list some of those challenges one by one. First, it has brought a wave of misinformation, disinformation, and targeted hate speech. Fake news about the cause of the virus, about its remedies, about certain communities being super spreaders was circulated on social media. Even the number of deaths and infections is being falsified by the system and the government. Second, that it has brought a human rights emergency, as Indu rightly pointed out. Poor countries about whom we do not even get to hear news are suffering and are out of resources. Refugees, migrants, asylum seekers, stateless persons, disabled people, children who are out of schools, people who are victims of domestic violence, people out of business, facing mental health issues and hunger have nowhere to go to seek relief against the virus. Third is the exercise of lawmaking and law upholding that has been compromised during the pandemic. It has been more than 100 days that in India, our farmers have been protesting against the farm laws, which were enacted in the midst of the pandemic without participation and consultation of stakeholders and lawmakers. Fourth, data privacy has been compromised. We have been asked to download certain applications to keep track of the infections at the cost of our data and without proper laws to protect our data. Fifth, the disparity between the rich and poor, the East and West has grown. Countries in the EU, the US, Canada have gotten 3, 4, 5 times vaccines that they actually need, while more than 100 powerless countries remain empty handed. Lastly, our system has been exposed. The incompetency of our governments has been exposed. Bad policies have been exposed, and the priorities of the governments have been exposed. Today, we are living through a world crisis, the likes of which hasn't been seen in 100 years. What we thought would last for at most 2, 3 months has been after us. Except the only difference between a movie and reality is that we do not have any hero to save us or heroines. And we don't know who to blame for all this. The only thing that we can do is to be prepared to minimize the impact of COVID-19 using the information and resources that we have at present. And we organized this EU India People Summit just to do that. We have more than 80 speakers who will talk about the challenges that I listed and possibly find ways to improve the present situation. It is true that we cannot prepare for the future and we cannot predict for what is to come because the last year has been full of uncertainties. But it is also true that not all of this can be blamed to nature. Our incompetent leaders and systems are at equal fault. Instead of sitting and complaining, with this summit, we hope to bring about possible change in policy making, in leadership, and in priorities. I cannot guarantee that the world will become a better place after the conclusion of this summit, and our panel of speakers will have solutions to all the challenges. But as a representative of the youth, I can only be hopeful and helpful in bringing about change. Thank you for listening to me. Join us in our 8-day EU India People's Summit if you are as clueless as me, but are willing to bring about change for the better. On this hopeful note, we now have a message from Alvina Almesta. Alvina Almesta is a Finnish politician of the Green League who has been serving as a member of the European Parliament since 2020. I will share my screen now in order for you to watch the video.
Dear participants, honorable speakers, and those representing the Indian diaspora, I'm very honored to be part of this EU-India People Summit. And while we are looking forward to a really inspiring week, we must remember that at the same time, India is facing an unprecedented COVID-19 crisis. In the beginning of the year, it seemed as if the battle against the virus has already been won in India. But as we now know, things changed very rapidly with this pandemic, and the circumstances currently are very tragic. Currently, India is facing a record in infections and mortalities, and the alarming situation in India requires the immediate attention of all of us. And I think that all of the support possible has to be extended to our friends in India. Alongside United Kingdom and US, the European Commission has confirmed to have assistance for India following a request made for the EU. 15 member states have already offered their assistance through the EU Civil Protection Mechanism, and I hope that the rest of the member states will join as well. The situation of Indian healthcare services is very difficult. There is lack of oxygen, ventilators, other medication, and also vaccinations. And the speed of the assistance from EU is at the essence. So we need to act now. Before this, India has showed solidarity with many countries earlier on in the pandemic by contributing to the COVAX system and also donating free vaccines to low-income countries. Now the tables have turned and it is our turn to show solidarity to India and Indian people. And to build a strong and enduring partnership in other things, we must first and foremost be of assistance to our partner today. We are truly all in this together. On 8th of May, there will be an important meeting between the leaders of EU and Prime Minister Modi. And there the discussion will be on EU and India future relationship. And I have had the honor to present a report on the topic for the European Parliament to make a line on how they think about the future of our relationship. And there has been many questions and many themes that have been raised. But one of those highlighted is human rights. Both EU and India have so much more to do in terms of reaching our goals in human rights and democracy. And in India, those concerns are especially related to the civic space and the shrinking of civic space. Also, there are some issues with the freedom of expression, freedom of press, arrests and corruption, detentions, and many kinds of restrictions. and tolerance of violations of religious freedom. Also, the members of European Parliament have expressed a deep concern regarding the India Citizenship Amendment Act, which, according to the Office of the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights, is fundamentally discriminatory in its nature. And there has been harassment of critics, including journalists and human rights defenders. And also the violence against women and girls in India is alarmingly high. So here we need effective implementation of laws dealing with sexual violence and speeding up legal process in the protection of the victims. And these are only some of the challenges we have faced. But of course, I must also say that there are similar issues also in EU. So we must also look inside ourselves and fix those issues. But I think that having a good partnership also means being honest with our partners and building these solutions together. The EU-India Human Rights Dialogue took place in April for the first time in many years, and it has took place in open and frank atmosphere as far as I can understand. But nevertheless, this is not enough to address these human rights challenges at the moment. Firstly, this is a local dialogue, and there have been no concrete commitments made at the end of it. And I think that the ambition of this dialogue must be raised. This requires participation at the highest level, concrete commitments for steps forward, and importantly, enough time to address all of those issues that we have. A 2-hour dialogue is barely enough time to scratch the surface and feels more like a box-ticking exercise than a genuine commitment for improvement. So this is something that the members of European Parliament are rather worried about, and we want to have more progress in terms of human rights dialogue and cooperation. The human rights dialogue should not be a reason not to bring human rights issues to the agenda of the EU high-level meeting with India on 8th of May. And I find it imperative that EU leaders robustly engage with the Indian counterparts on deteriorating human rights situation in India and ensure that there are concrete deliverables as an outcome of the high-level meeting. For me, when I have been preparing this report, I have met many of the human rights defenders, minorities, NGOs, experts, researchers, diplomats, and different kind of experts on this topic. And I hope that we would all hear what they have to say. And I hope that the reflection of this is inside the recommendation that we have made in the European Parliament. Another key issue that I would like to raise for the cooperation is climate change. We are facing a climate crisis, and when we are trying to respond to it, not one day can be missed. Both EU and India have a strong motivation to tackle climate change, and through shared action, we would have a lot more better chances of doing that. As the world's largest democracies, we must strengthen our climate diplomacy and promote cutting the emissions worldwide. India is currently on a track to reach and go beyond the nationally determined contributions. This is impressive, but however, the EU member states and India are still the 3rd and 4th largest emitters of CO2 worldwide, respectively. And this shows that our current efforts are not sufficient yet. Both EU and India must therefore increase the ambition in climate action, and we must commit to climate neutrality and the Paris Agreement. We have the tools and skills to do this, so let's rise to this challenge together. The UN Biodiversity Conference and UN Climate Conference in Glasgow are both around the corner, and these both show also an opportunity to commit to this more ambitious climate agenda. Finally, I know that the relationship between EU and India cannot only be about governments getting together. A dynamic partnership requires active participation of the Indian and EU civil society, including trade unions, faith-based organizations, feminist and minority organizations, environmentalists, and other stakeholders. And all of these people have so much to give, but they also play a really important role in monitoring the progress of what we are doing in the EU-India strategic partnership. And in my report, the members of European Parliament also made a recommendation to establish an EU-India civil society platform and EU-India Youth Summit as a side event for future EU-India summits, in order to strengthen relations also between different kind of groups of people and also younger generations. And I very much hope that this recommendation will be implemented. And furthermore, as a parliamentarian, I value a very strong inter-parliamentary dialogue between the Indian and European parliaments, bringing valuable insight for our partnership. For us politicians, this is an opportunity to learn more from each other, and we must do our best to promote these kind of people-to-people exchanges, whether in public education, research and innovation, or cultural exchange. This EU-India People's Summit definitely responds to these needs, and this is why this is very, very important. And I look forward to listening to speeches and presentations during this week and learning from all of you. And I would like to congratulate the organizers for this impressive work that they have done with this seminar, and also the speakers. This is very impressive. And I am sure that the week ahead will be fruitful and full of lessons to be learned for us all. And I wish you all a very enjoyable and interesting week. Thank you all.
That was a nice speech from Alvina, and this also brings me to tell you why this People Summit and how this People Summit came to being. At the beginning of this year, we tried our best to be a stakeholder in the EU-India diplomatic dialogue. There were quite some emails sent, quite some phone calls made, but we were told that the diplomatic dialogue is close to the civil society, which led us to decide that this space needs to be opened up and this space needs to be occupied. And that is why we have today the EU-India People's Summit, and what Alvina pointed out very rightly there, that we need to have civil societies, youth, stakeholders of all sorts present in the diplomatic dialogues which determine our future, our collective future and our collective transnationalism. Now, to introduce myself, I am Dr. Ritamra Manavi. I am the co-founder of Foundation London Story and a co-organizer for this summit. I have my whole team here. We have all worked relentlessly over the past few weeks to bring to you this summit, a massive festival of ideas, as we like to call it. And I would like to give them a round of applause for all the hard work that they have put into this. I would also like to take a step back to say that this is neither the beginning nor the end. We have been working towards quietly, and in the background, we have been working towards a progressive society, a society where we are all equal, or we can stand up for human rights, we can raise our concerns and our voices, and we can come together to find solutions which affect our entire humanity. A society which is not bound by the narrow domestic walls of nationalism or national boundaries, so to say. And we will continue our work post the summit in this direction. I would now like to read to you some excerpts from a book of a person who could not join us today, but I thought that this very much reflects where we stand today as a society, as a human race, and where we should be headed after this. We are in the throes of a Kali Yuga, the age of Kali, the lowest possible throw, an epoch of strife, corruption, darkness, and disintegration. in the age of Kali, the great gods Vishnu and Shiva are asleep and do not hear the prayers of their devotee. In such an age, normal conventions fall apart. Anything is possible. The kings of Kali Yuga will be addicted to corruption and will seize the property of their subjects, but will, for most part, be of limited power, rising and falling rapidly. Property and wealth alone will confer rank. Falsehood will be the only means of success in litigation. In the Kali age, shall strife and decay constantly proceed until the human race approaches annihilation. However, the Kali Yuga is the last age before the world is destroyed by the fire of 1,000 suns, after which the cycle reaches its conclusion and time momentarily stops. Before the wheel turns again and a new cycle begins. Today, while we start this summit, we have disease, death, and uncertainty around us. But just like after the age of Kali comes the new beginning, there will be a new beginning. After this, there would also be a new hope, new vision, so to say. And as a young diaspora, an international diaspora, not bound by the narrow domestic walls, we hope that we are able to create opportunities which are inclusive. As Indians, diasporic Indians, it is our promise to you within our home country as well as our adopted country that we will not abandon your struggles for equality and acceptance. We had and we will always stand up for human rights and human dignity for every last person in the line. And with this promise and responsibility upon ourselves, I invite you to join this festival of idea and hope and join us in solidarity with the humans around the world so that we can bring in a hopeful new future. And I would like to end on an Ubuntu proverb, which says, I am because you are, because we are. Thank you. We are now going to start our summit. Our first panel starts in roughly half an hour. It's on farmers and land rights, and we have 3 wonderful speakers on that panel, and I would invite you to join us there. After a short break, we will be back in the panel, and we will be taking your questions and answers there, and feel free to join us and give us your feedbacks. Thank you.